Hi, welcome back to my channel. Today, I just want to sit down and talk to you guys about living with roommates because this school year has really been a ride, and I do think if I could go back, I would do some things differently that maybe would make it so my roommate experience wasn't as eventful, I guess I would say. So this isn't exactly advice, but just me talking in general about living with roommates, and yeah, just taking a look back at things I did that maybe I wouldn't have done now. So basically, I started looking for roommates really late. I only gave myself about a month between trying to find a roommate and signing a lease. And that's not really good, because what I would have liked to have done was made it so I had ample time to find a roommate, so that if I was talking to one person and it didn't work out, I would be able to look for someone else without feeling like I was in a time crunch. So that's something I would have done differently. Also, when I made my post on Facebook, I made my post trying to find roommates on a ECU Facebook group, which a lot of people do, just for anything, if they're trying to find roommates, if they're trying to lease out their own apartment, if they're trying to make friends, if blah blah blah. So I made my post, and you really have to be very honest when you make those posts. Like, if you're really into partying, I would put that in your post. If you're really not into partying, I would put that in your post. And you have to be honest. You have to be honest. If you're like, oh, like, I mean, like, I don't really like partying, but like sometimes I'll do, like, be a little more black and white if it's black and white, you know. I know some people might not want to come off a certain way, and so that's why they'll kind of talk a little softer about things like that. But let's say you really like to party, and then in your post you're like, oh no, I don't really do it that much, like blah blah. But then you go out every single night and you're matched up with someone now who doesn't party at all. You're probably gonna have a conflict when that person maybe doesn't like that you're coming home really late at night being really loud, and vice versa. You're probably not gonna like that they're complaining about you. So be honest, be very honest. Where I kind of messed up a little bit is when I did find someone who I was like, oh, okay, I could room with them. Again, I was in a time crunch, so I didn't have a lot of options. I'm an introvert, and I feel like when you're an introvert, it's very easy for you to spot when someone else is an extrovert. But when I was talking to this person, they were like, oh, like when I said I was introverted, they're like, oh yeah, like I'm really introverted too, like, you know, I don't really like being around people that much. But there was something they said that just clued me into the fact that that just wasn't true. That just wasn't true. And I could tell, you know, it's like a little red flag, but I was like, let me look beyond that, because I need a place to live. And I just wanted to kind of get an idea of the people that I was going to be living with, since again, didn't have a lot of time. So that's one thing. I would start setting up your roommate rules quickly. Like, I would start thinking about it before you even pick someone, or just think of things that you just would be uncomfortable with and just try to make rules around that. I always think that it's better to think proactively about what you'd want to communicate to your roommates, so that it's not a thing where you're constantly bringing up things that you don't like about the other person and having them be like whoa, like I didn't know that you felt this way about this, that, and the third. So if you're like, if you like when the apartment's like cold, if you like when it's hot, like think about the temperature, think about your level of like cleanliness around the place. Like, do you always need the kitchen to be like spick and span, or are you all right with like dishes being in the sink for like a day, you know, or even a little longer than that? I don't know. Just so that it's all kind of like out in the open from the jump. Because right now, we don't have a bunch, but we have like a roommate meeting where we start talking about the rules, or like the rules that we want to establish, and then we had to end up having a second roommate meeting about the rules that we want to establish or like amend or like whatever. And things like that, you can tell they're starting to annoy some people. And me in general, I just don't really like the roommate meetings. They're necessary, don't get me wrong, they're very necessary, but it does kind of come off passive aggressive, especially if you feel like there's only like one person you're really addressing in the roommate meeting. Like, yeah guys, let's all have a meeting to discuss things that people have been doing, but by like people, it's like really like Samantha. So yeah, just get it out in the open. And again, be honest, and especially if you're living with a friend. I'm not living with someone I knew this year. I have 3 other roommates, but if you're rooming with a friend, which whether or not you should room with a friend is a very personal thing. Like, you really have to know yourself and the other person to be like, yeah, this can work or this can't work. But if you are friends with that person and you're planning on living together, there probably are some things that you already know could possibly be problems. So again, maybe think of some rules you could set up to prevent unwanted experiences. I probably could have worded that better, but I think you get the point. I definitely want to get into a video talking about my roommate experience in depth a little bit. That's not gonna be soon. I definitely want to wait until I move out. Oh, also, I think it's very important for you not to just think from your perspective if you're having arguments with your roommates. Because here's the thing, if you're living with strangers, you probably all grew up differently. You all grew up differently. So if I look at someone who's doing something that I don't like, and I'm like, oh, well, I guess we weren't just weren't raised the same. That's true, but also they could be thinking the same thing about you. So I don't make things like super like one-sided. Try to see the person's other side. I think where me and my roommates or roommate kind of get a little off track is when I always try to think of things from like their perspective, and I'm like, oh, well, maybe like when I said this or when I did this might have affected them in this negative way. But then I feel like when I'm talking to them, I can just hear that they've never for 1 second thought of anything from my perspective, and that makes me upset. So that's kind of where the disconnect comes in. Like in college, you meet people from literally all walks of life. So I would also not just think that you're going to automatically be right about everything, and also take accountability. If you have 10 grievances against someone and they have 1 against you, but it's actually valid, admit it, like apologize if it's that type of thing. And also, you don't always have to make a grand apology. Sometimes a quick like, yeah, like I'm sorry, I didn't know that would bother you. That honestly does go a long way, and maybe, just maybe, it will open them up to taking accountability for some things, and then maybe something could actually be solved. Because it's not easy living with other people, especially if you're not related to them. There are certain things that might get on your nerves that someone else is doing that's like small in the grand scheme of things, but maybe at the moment it just really irks you. You know how some people like have like an issue of like they're going into the kitchen to eat and then someone else comes in while they're eating, and it's like, why are you here? Like, sometimes little things like that do like irritate you, and they can build up and make tense situations within a living space. Because, you know, it is your home, you know, even though you're living with roommates, where you're rooming is your home. So when you come back to it, you want it to be a comfortable, safe environment. And sometimes when you're with people who just don't think about things the same way, it really does derail that whole thing. So yeah, I didn't want this to be too long of a video, and I know I talked really vaguely about a lot of things, but I don't know, I might have a part 2, or just, you know, later just talk about what's actually going on with me in depth, because I do think that telling about my experience and then being able to say, hey, like, this is where I could have done something better, but then also like this is why, like after reflecting about certain things, this is where things went wrong, and here's how I could have approached that differently. But then sometimes if you do have disagreements with other people, some things do just seem like inevitable. And that's also okay to admit. Like, some people just are really so incompatible that no matter how you would have approached something, given had the chance to amend a certain point, it might just not work out anyways. But yeah, I guess I will see you guys in the next one. That's really all I have to say about that. So, bye.